Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Michael DeLon. As the president of Paperback Expert, Michael helps business owners publish a book that positions them as the expert in their field. Here today to talk about how and why he became an expert in credibility marketing and so much more is Michael DeLon. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Michael.
Hey, thank you, Mike. It is going to be a great conversation. I really appreciate you having me here.
Well, you've got me smiling already with your infectious optimism. So I have to ask you the question I ask everybody right out the gate. Michael, tell me, where does your story begin?
Well, that's a great question. My story really begins on June 29th of 1987. And that's the day that my dad was killed in a motorcycle accident. And I remember exactly where I was when my brother and I worked at the same auto dealership. I remember him walking over to me. I know right where I was. And we went to the hospital. Couldn't see him because the doctor said, no, he's too bad in shape. I remember going home that night, walking in the front door. And I was riding a motorcycle as well. I parked my motorcycle, didn't ride it again for years because I didn't want my mom to have to worry about me. And I remember walking into the kitchen, Mike, and there was this little note that my dad had written to me. It says, Mike, I'm up to the lake to go see his mom. My mom's working till 10 o'clock. She was a cashier at a grocery store. See you later, Dad. It's the last thing I have from my dad. That note now hangs in my closet. And if my house burns down, that's the only thing I'm getting, right? But because of that note, I now write letters to my family, to my wife on Mother's Day, on her birthday, on her anniversary, to my children on their birthday, right? We've got Father's Day coming up pretty soon here in America. I write Father's Day letters to my children.
I do the same thing.
Thanking them that I'm, just the gratefulness I am to be a father. I think all of that started with that note that my dad wrote me, because I know he was thinking of me, and it just is super impactful.
Did he often write notes like that for you to leave, or what do you think?
Well, he would write little notes like when he was going something, because he was a fireman, so he'd work a day, off a day, work a day, off a day, and I was probably out working or something, and so he just said, "Hey, here's where I'm going." So we would write little notes, just say it was just when I'm not here, this is where I am type thing. So we did that regularly. But as far as writing letters and things, I don't have a letter from my dad that he ever wrote me, but I have that note.
Yeah. Wow. So how would you characterize how his death impacted your life?
Unbelievable. So I remember lots of things. It's really given me a different perspective on death. Okay. Because I grew up in a Christian family. I went to church, but when he died, I was not a follower of Christ. And so I started going to church again with my mom after his death, because she needed to be in church with all of her church friends, right? Well, it was shortly after that God got a hold of me, and I gave my life to Christ. And because of that understanding that this life on earth is not our last life, that we're really living for eternity, it's helped me understand that death is a part of life. And so when people die, I don't get all wigged out, and I mean, I mourn if they're close to me, and I comfort people. But because of my dad's dying, and he was a follower of Christ, I know I'm going to see him again. And because of that belief, it helps me understand that it's just a transition point. It's hard, but it should be hard if you have deep relationships, right? My wife and I were foster parents for 8 years, and we had about 20 kids in and out of our house. And as we would tell people, they're like, "Oh, you're saints, and I could never do that because, to give those kids away just ripped my heart out." And I'd look you in the eye and say, that's exactly why you should be a foster parent. Those children need love and care and protection, and it should be hard to give them away. That's not a reason not to do it, right? it's just a different perspective. So my dad's death really helped me understand death as a part of life, and to embrace the reality of death. So it's just, let's mourn. Let's remember the good things, like the note he wrote, the motorcycle trips we took, the way he vacuumed the house and made dinner sometimes. Let's remember those things, and let's pass that on. My family, Mike, I've been married 32 years. My wife and family have never met my dad.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the day that we get a reunion in heaven. So,
Right. I think about it because my father is turning 90 in August. My mother's turning 89. And they live far away. They live in Florida. I'm in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And so we don't see them as much as we'd like. I've been, business trips have been taking me down there once a month for the past 3 months. So that's been good. But I see my mother's health is failing. Her mind is not what it used to be. She was a sharp woman. We're talking New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle, doesn't miss a beat, and she still can do it, but her memory is shot. Like her short-term memory is shot. So there's a beautiful thing in having your parents as long as I've had mine, but there's also like a sadness kind of witnessing their decline like that. Because it's like a slow burn, it's like, how the story's gonna end.
Yes. And well, yes. And all right. So because of my weird perspective, my mom's 93. She's in a assisted living facility, still fairly sharp, but very little quality of life. I mean, she's, and I'm praying, forgive me, I'm praying that God takes her home, because she's lived her life. She was one of 12 kids. She's outlived all of her brothers and sisters. She really has no. Take her home, Lord. Yeah. My wife's in Minnesota visiting her parents right now. They're 78, 79. And her dad used to be a CFO of a large media conglomerate, sharp as a tack. But we're seeing the onset of probably dementia or something. He's not as sharp. And we're grieving that because he's not the same person. Yeah. Our conversations now have changed.
It's so interesting you say that, because I was talking to my dad. I was talking to my dad when I was down there a couple weekends ago, and he just took me aside. He's like, I'm having such a hard time with your mother. I'm like, I know. I'm like, we all get to come and go. Like, we get to go home. You have to live with her. And there's some beauty in this, in that he spent his whole life, traveling, working as a salesman. So mom really held down the fort and enabled him to have the career he was able to have, because he could rely on her to handle all the family stuff.
Absolutely.
And she took care of him, and now he's taking care of her. So there's some beauty to that. However, I do know, and I get frustrated spending 20 minutes with my mom, listening to her ask the same question over and over again.
Yes.
And he took me aside. He says, I'm having a really hard time with this. So I had a tough conversation with him last week. Again, remember, he's almost 90. I said, hey, there's no shame in wanting to talk to somebody. I'm like, I called their church. I'm like, looking to see if they had like a support group for, people going through something like this. And they said, no, but the pastor is a trained marriage and family therapist. We'd be happy to talk to him. So I told this to my dad, and then you could hear a pin drop. Like, he's like, just not interested in, but I said, Dad, you are grieving mom. She's not dead, and we're all grieving her because we miss who she was, and she's not the same person anymore. But it sounds like there's a similar experience going on.
Yeah, we're there, and it's hard. There is a beauty of staying with your mate, but there's wisdom, I think, in him having somebody to talk to, and in finding some support, some at-home care people who can come in and relieve him for a few hours. Yeah, there's all kinds of things, and those are challenging situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you were working in auto sales, is that right?
I was an auto mechanic.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you remember the commercials? These are the hands of Mr. Goodrich.
Yes, of course, Mr. Goodrich. Yeah,
that was me.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Right, so it sounds like your career has taken a couple of different turns. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh man, I went to college first of all to be an electrical engineer, because my parents said that was the wave of the future. This was back in 80. I graduated high school in 84. So I went to be an electrical engineer, right? That lasted about a semester and a half until I flunked out. I said, that is not my future. It may be the wave of the future. It is not my wave.
It's a lot of math.
It is. Oh my goodness. So then I found an opportunity at this car dealership where they would help me get an education as an auto mechanic in Dayton, Ohio, 6 weeks in college, come back, work in the dealership for 6 weeks with like the guy who did brakes, right? Go back and forth. So I was an auto mechanic for about 3 years total-ish. And I started going home when I was 21 with a sore back and sore knees from bending over fenders all day. And I said, yeah, I don't want to do this all my life. So I was in a bookstore one day in the mall, and I looked down and I saw this book with a big red cover. It says, How to Master the Art of Selling, Tom Hopkins. I picked that up. I'm like, wow, that sounds good to me. So I read the book, and I moved. I decided I was going to be a realtor like Tom. And so I left the dealership, became a realtor, and was staying at home. That's about when my dad died. So I was living at home with my mom. Did that for a while, met my wife, and she didn't like me working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, because that's what you do when you're a single guy. And so she came into my life, and I left there and went to a moving company, North American Van Lines Moving Company. I was a sales guy for them for a year and a half. And then and this was in Kokomo, Indiana, and over in Anderson, about an hour and a half away, a university over there started a Christian radio station as part of their broadcasting. And Jill's dad was in media, and I thought that'd be kind of fun. So we moved into Anderson so I could become a full-time student to finish my degree and a part-time salesperson at that radio station. Well, that worked. I graduated. I stayed on. So about 9.5 total years in Christian radio sales and marketing. Then God led us out of that to a startup.com back when Amazon was just starting. Remember William Shatner on the radio?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
World's largest bookstore. At that time, I was selling websites and banner advertising to car dealers and hospitals that didn't have them, because we were going to change the internet. We were going to localize the internet. Well, that company was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Which means they went bankrupt.
Exactly. It's a nice way of saying they're no longer with us.
That's right. So I found myself in my and that lasted about 2 years. I found myself standing in my living room, looking up to God, going, okay, what am I supposed to do now? And what I didn't tell you is the first 5 years of my marriage were like this. Okay. My wife and I are complete opposites. Nobody told us how to be married. So we went to a family life marriage conference 5 years into our marriage and learned God's blueprints for marriage. I didn't know he had any. And that changed our marriage. We got real involved with that ministry. And so when the .com went out of business, God called us to be full-time vocational missionaries with family life in America, serving marriages and families. So we raised our support, moved to Little Rock, Arkansas. I thought I was in nirvana. Why would I ever leave? Climbed the corporate ladder. 6 years later, I was on the leadership team of this ministry, and everything was going great until they started going through corporate reorganizations. Remember that?
Oh, sure.
And so third reorg, they rolled out the new chart, and I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking, and my name's not on the leadership team anymore. And I'm saying, that's not a good sign. So they started shuffling me around the ministry to do lots of different things. That began a 2-year term for me. I call it my prison term. When I was in a job that I hated at a ministry I loved, but it was just sucking all the energy out of me. So after 2 years, I talked to my wife and prayed. I said, God, I got to get out of this place. And God said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to go help small business owners with marketing because they hate it and I love it. And he said, go. And so I created my plans. And on January 1st of 2013, I escaped prison and started a marketing consulting firm. I had one client and helped him break through some barriers. He'd refer me to you. I'd come out and talk to you, Mike, and say, I can help you with your marketing. We'd have a great conversation. Somewhere in that conversation, you say, now, Michael, what have you done in the last few years? Right? I say, well, I've helped build marriages and families at Family Life. And you say, oh, that's awesome. Way to go, Michael. That's honorable. Oh, look at the time. I've got another meeting coming up. Let's keep this conversation going. And you usher me out the door. I was having a hard time gaining clients because nobody thought I could help them. And so I knew I had to fix that because I was living on savings. So I went back to my church, second floor of my church. I see it today. I was pacing the hallways back and forth, crying out to God, saying, how do I help Mike and other people? Because I know I can. And God laid it on my heart to take all of my marketing strategies and put them in a book. And so I did. So I published my book on marketing back in 2013. Then I would call you, set an appointment. I'd mail a copy of my book to you. A week later, I'd walk into your office for our meeting. And there it was. My book was on your desk, dog-eared, highlighted, underlined. You'd read my book. And in that meeting, you'd say, now, Michael, in your book, you said, how do you help me do that? And you'd hire me. And the next guy hired me. And I started gaining clients. I thought, this is really cool. Why don't business owners do this for marketing? Well, it's hard to write a book. So I created a really simple system and started going to BNI groups and telling people about what I was doing. And business owners just started popping up saying, I've always thought about writing a book. I don't know how to do it. Can you help me? And so we started helping business owners create their book without writing a word, teach them how to use it in their marketing, grow their business. And that's what I do today. So you're right. I have reiterated myself multiple times, like a pinball, right? Ding, ding, ding. That's me. But I've just always been walking through this whole journey, trying to figure out what God created me to do. And I think I finally found it.
There you go. Well, and there's always time to pivot, but how many books do you suppose that you've helped write? People have you helped?
I tell people I stopped counting after about 320.
Okay.
Yeah. We've been doing this for a decade and it's just like, I don't know, lots.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun.
Right. So what's the conversation go like? Like if we role played here for a minute, I'd be like, hey, Mike, I'm Mike. I'm thinking about, writing a book. Like what's the process? Are you consider yourself a coach? Are you, what do you do?
Right. Yeah. So after we determined the purpose of the book, which is really to generate revenue for your business, you're not going to get rich selling on Amazon, right? So we understand it's a business growth tool. Then you and I work together for the first month to understand your signature message. What is the title, the theme of your book? Then we bring one of our writers to the table, and through a series of conversations, usually over Zoom, they're interviewing you. They're building the outline for your book. We believe you're an expert at what you do. B, you have everything in your head and your heart to create your book. Our job is to get it out and to structure it properly. So that happens through conversations. So we build the outline. Once the outline's done, then the writer's going to cue you up and ask you questions so you will actually speak to write your book. We record it, transcribe all that. And then the writer who's been with you now for a couple, 3 months, who understands you and how you communicate, they're going to take your words and massage them into your manuscript. And you work back and forth with the writer to make sure that the book sounds like you, has your message, and is what you would want to put out. And then obviously we then format it to be a book. We do cover design, we do publishing, we do promotion to Amazon, we do everything. We've just simplified the entire process that it takes, really, if you follow our process and everything works, it takes less than 24 clock hours of your time, hundreds of hours over about 6 to 7 months to get your book created.
Yeah.
But it's a really simple process.
Yeah. No, it sounds like, I think about your target, these small business owners or I don't mean just to focus on small business owners, any business owner, it's a 24/7 thing typically. And they need to spend a lot of their time running their business. So if you can take that 24 hours and spread it over the course of, I don't know how many weeks or months, it's much more manageable for people. And it's a great investment, for their own marketing.
Oh, without question. Yeah. It becomes the cornerstone of all of your message. It gives you something to put on your website, something to hand out to prospects, something to give to clients so that you can stimulate referrals, right? We've created books for auto shops. The guy who wrote the book on what are all those dash lights mean on your car, right? He wrote a book about that. And when people come in to get their car repaired, he gives them a copy of the book. He says, have your 16-year-old child read this book as they get their driver's license. They're going to be much better. Wow. We've done it with roofers. We've done it with home inspectors. A guy who trains canine dogs for police forces. That was really cool. And then, of course, we work with a lot of financial advisors, attorneys, professional speakers. So it really runs the gamut because business owners have a story to tell. There's a reason. I mean, just like my story with my dad, with escaping prison, when I tell that story, Mike, it resonates with people. A lot of business owners have been in prison before, right? Jobs they hated. They get it. And I want you to tell your story to your audience. And I find a lot of business owners don't. And when you do that, people connect with you. And that's what we help you do, is tell your story, talk about your process. How do you help people? It gives you an opportunity to have a 2 or 3 hour conversation with a prospect without you being there.
Yeah.
Because they're going to read the pages of your book. So that's really cool.
It's interesting, thinking about story. And I'm someone who helps, people craft stories for a living. And a lot of the times it's big brands, in my day job, I do market research for for some big brands, but oftentimes you find that business owners don't know what their story is because they're so mired in doing the work, or they launch a business and they forget maybe what the backstory is. So having someone external come in and help guide that and shape that and help them figure it out, I think it's that's part of your winning formula there.
Well, it is, not to brag, but it is. So case in point, I had an attorney, personal injury attorney down in Florida. Okay. Young guy, been in business a few years, going against two Goliaths. Okay. And he's like, I just need something. So I want to create a book because that's going to set me apart. Well, he didn't have a really clear message. So we asked him our question. We went through, found out he went to Florida on a baseball scholarship. He was a pitcher and he was headed for the major leagues. And after a couple of years, he threw his arm out, had to have surgery, had to go through rehabilitation, killed his baseball career. Well, now he's a personal injury attorney, right? And he helps people who are in accidents, who go through rehab, who have their life thrown out of kilter. And I asked him, I said, William, have you ever told anybody that story? And he's like, no, why does it matter? I said, it matters. So we created his branding, his book, and his book now is called When Life Throws You a Curveball.
Yeah.
Right. Former pitcher turned attorney. And I said, what you went through is exactly what your clients are going through. They're going to resonate with your story. So now on the morning news, when he's on there, doing his thing, I told him to walk on with his attorney suit, carrying a baseball mitt, because they're going to resonate with baseball because everybody loves baseball. And they're going to allow him to tell his story and say, just go to my website, get a free copy of my book and read about my story and how I can help you. If, God forbid, life ever throws you a curveball, I want to be right there cheering you on. Changed his business, changed his marketing. I didn't do anything but discover a story that was already there and show him how to use it. A lot like what you do, right? Every business owner has that story.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. That's a great example. I mean, in many ways, you're doing, for business owners, what like big, brand advertising agencies, we're supposed to be doing. But how many personal injury attorneys can hire, McCann Erickson or Falcone and Belding or,
That's right. That's right.
Sterling Cooper.
They can't, right? And they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And now not only does he have a great, clear message and brand that he uses everywhere, but he has a marketing asset in his book that will last the rest of his career, because books have shelf life, right? They don't go away. And I love books, Mike, because it's sacrilegious in our culture to throw a book away. So once you hand it to somebody, they move it from house to house to house, and you become a household, a fixture in their house, which is really what you want to be as a business owner. You want to be a resource to people. And when you write your book that way, you become the first one they think of and the one they feel the best about for them and their friends and their neighbors and their relatives to say, hey, I got a guy. I know a guy.
Right.
And they hand you a copy of his book. Just read his book. And it makes a significant impact in marketing, but in business growth.
Yeah. And I'd like the point of view that they're not going to earn their primary income from book sales. Because anyone who's listening, if you think that you're going to write a book and get rich, it's
yeah. Think again.
You might want to rethink that, but using it as a tool to build your credibility, to give somebody, what we would call a reason to believe in, your abilities, your service, a calling card,
Yeah. The best business card in the world, really, because what do you do if you get somebody's business card? I might take a picture of it. I usually just throw it away, or I put it in a Ziploc. They'll never put, experts have books. They just do. And you're an expert at what you do. But here's the line I hear week in and week out as I talk with prospects. I've always thought about writing a book. I don't know where to start. Look at a blank screen. No, don't. And I tell people, I'm like, never write a book. Speak to write your book. Whether you hire me or whether you use Microsoft Word or Google Docs, use the dictate function. Dictate into your phone. Speak what's in your head. Get it out onto paper and then edit it, or hire somebody to do it. But don't sit in your computer and type. It's just not only is it harder and longer to do that, you use different parts of your brain when you're typing than when you're speaking. And we are all communicators. So use your gift of speaking and communication to get your message out on paper, then get somebody who understands writing to make it sound great.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're right. When we do type, we're processing at the same time. We're thinking, we're reflecting, we're processing, we're editing. Many of us do that anyway.
Yeah.
But when you're speaking, it's really just stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting out there. And then you can go back and
then you go back
Yeah.
and fine tune it. So it's so much easier, faster. But nobody thinks about it. They're like, well, you have to write a book. Well, you know what? I don't think Simon Sinek writes his books. I think he speaks and people write it for him, right? So it's not like you're being incongruous or unethical. No, it's your thought. It's your ideas. And again, what I tell you, you don't get rich selling your book. You gain wealth selling your ideas through your book and positioning yourself as a thought leader in the mind of your audience. That's where the wealth comes from. That's how you serve more people.
Yeah. Well, awesome. This is all good stuff. I do have some questions though, because I call this uncorking a story, because I always want to uncork what I call the story behind the story, which is your story. And you started off by sharing a lot, particularly with your father's passing. I do have some other like fun questions that I like to ask. And the first one would be, if you think back to your childhood, what were some of your favorite TV shows when you were growing up?
Oh man. I grew up on TV. So we had Courtship of Eddie's Father. I remember that. I can sing you the theme song. Obviously all the cartoons, right? With Bugs Bunny and Shaggy and the mystery gang on Scooby-Doo. Wow. I remember watching as a family, Hee Haw.
Oh, sure. Hee Haw, yeah.
Wow. Salute.
Mr. Green Jeans, was he in Hee Haw?
Exactly. Those, and then obviously for me during my high school years, MASH.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember watching the final episode of MASH with my grandfather, who was a surgeon, field surgeon in World War II.
Okay.
And he loved MASH.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those shows that was certainly very comedic, but it also had a lot of heart to it. I mean,
really
they had some very deep episodes.
They did.
I remember that. That was one of the. I mean, for years it was the benchmark for TV ratings. Like the last episode of MASH was for so long known as the most watched show on television ever.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. So that's I would just remember, laying on the couch in the living room, doing that. The other thing I remember about watching TV back in the day, Mike, when I was growing up, is I was the remote control.
You were the remote control. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
My girls don't understand that at all. I'm like, no, you.
Well, also, if you remember, because we didn't have cable TV until the mid 80s, you were doing the rabbit ears too. Like if there was something off, you had to kind of adjust the rabbit ears a little bit.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember doing MTV when MTV first came out, right? We had this old TV and we couldn't get MTV unless I opened up the panel and moved the little dial to go in between. I remember all of that. And the TV repairman with his mirrors on the front and he's working on the back, and we date ourselves. Yeah, no,
absolutely. I remember when MTV came out, my mother was, you're not allowed to watch that.
Yeah.
she did not like us watching MTV at all.
You remember Martha Quinn?
Martha Quinn, absolutely.
She was like the first MTV person I remember. So,
oh gosh, Martha Quinn, Alan Hunter, JJ Fad. Many of them are on Sirius XM. They are DJs on the 80s on 8. So you hear them.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Some of them are still around.
How very cool.
Yeah. How about this musical artist? As long as we were talking about MTV, who did you grow up listening to?
Yeah. I think my favorite artist was Styx.
Oh, sure.
Dennis DeYoung and all
Dennis
of them.
DeYoung, Tommy Shaw.
Yeah. Welcome to the Grand Illusion. That was amazing. And then, of course, I listened to, Zeppelin and Bob Seger. I saw him in concert one time. And I just remember the place going dark and that saxophone from Turn the Page with Clarence, I think Clarence Clemens, right? It's like, wow, just iconic moments of my childhood going, wow. REO Speedwagon, Riding the Storm Out, Journey. That's just kind of what I grew up on.
Sure.
And I still listen to some of it today on, Spotify and just classic rock and favorites. And
oh yeah. I mean, nothing wrong with any of those. Journey. I mean, Journey had a big comeback with Don't Stop Believing. I mean, it's always been a popular song, but I think that the last episode of The Sopranos featured it, and then it kind of got back into the zeitgeist, if you will.
Yes.
I know you've written a book, and I'm sure you do a lot of writing as well. I'm just curious as to in what ways, if any, has writing been therapeutic for you?
Yeah. Writing helps me more so, less out of books, but more so the letters that I write to my family and those who are around me. Cause I'll write letters to friends and things to be able and on those, I typically actually I type because it's only a letter, but it gives me the opportunity to deeply, deeply reflect and say, how am I going to communicate what's in my heart in an economy of words? That's really poetry. Poetry is not about rhyme and rhythm as much as it is getting you to see something from a different perspective with an economy of words. How can I say this with few words and be impactful? And it takes me time to sit and think and go, okay, what am I trying to communicate here? Sometimes I'll do it in poetry. Sometimes I'll do it with an acrostic. Sometimes I'll just write. But what are the 4, 5, or 6 things that I want to make an impact in your life and let you know, I've noticed this about you. I want to affirm you here and be able to write a paragraph or 2 around that. For me, makes me more reflective and helps me understand the power of words. And for me, the written word, but the power of deep thinking and affirming those around us and expressing thanks, because I can't tell my dad thank you anymore. So don't miss the opportunity to tell those closest to you how much you appreciate them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So that's what writing's really done for me, is reflective meditation on a specific person.
Yeah, and you're giving them artifacts to keep. Just like you have that letter from your dad in your closet that you're going to run into a burning house to grab.
Yeah.
You're giving your loved ones and people you care about something to have.
Let me jump in here with a parenting tip real quick. This is I do this to all parents with new kids, or any kid, but especially with a young one. Start like a Gmail account for your child. And as you are interacting with them, taking pictures and videos of them, send it to their Gmail account with a short little note saying, hey, I love pushing you on the swing. I really enjoy our time together. I'm so glad you're my daughter, whatever it is. And that way, when they get to 12, 13, 14, and they open that Gmail account, they're going to have dozens of emails from you and other family members affirming them, memories. It's a simple little thing to do. And I just think it's a great way for them to go, wow, I'm loved, right? So
that's great. That's a great tip. I've never thought of that. So look at you. That might be your next book. Parenting tips by Michael DeLon.
There you go. Yeah, that'd be fun.
What lessons have you, or even the authors you've worked with, and the kind of feedback they've given you about writing and publishing, do you feel like we're learned the hard way? Can you think of any?
No, we're learned the hard way?
Yeah. Like, what did you have to learn the hard way, or do you feel like you learned the hard way? Think about the first time out of the gate writing a book. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, not having a clue. Because when I wrote this book, I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew I had to get it done. And I guess the one thing that there are always people out there that you can reach out to find help. So my first, when I published my book, I was like, okay, I've got it done. How do I get printed copies? Well, I found a company in like Michigan, and I had to buy, 150 copies at a time or something. I'm like, okay, that's okay. I'll get through them. Well, my second client, he's like, well, why don't you use the Create Space?
Yeah.
I'm like, what's that? He's like, oh, it's this thing. It's owned by Amazon. Here's what it is. I'm like, oh, glory be to God. So I didn't know, but that didn't stop me. I would go find people to do the graphic artists. So I think the hardest thing was, I don't have to do it on my own. I can do some of it, but there are always people out there. Ask, and don't be ashamed that you don't know. It's okay to be ignorant. Right? I'm ignorant on a lot of things, but I ask those dumb questions, right? I just don't understand. Help me out. So that was the hard thing for me, is just to beat my head against the wall, trying to figure things out on myself when I could just easily ask somebody else, go, oh, I didn't even know that was available. Thank you.
Yeah. And now you're the person people ask questions to, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Given your business. And just thinking about letters, if you could mail a letter to your younger self, pick an age, maybe it's when your father passed away, maybe it's before, I don't know. What words of advice or comfort would you give your younger self from your current self perspective?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is have enough confidence in who you are and who God's made you to be yourself. Because for the longest time, Mike, I was trying to be the person I thought you wanted me to be. And so it came out of my real estate career because I was door knocking, right, in a suit, because that's what realtors looked like. And then when I started my company, I work with, high powered attorneys and financial advisors. So I had to wear a jacket and I didn't do video for a long time because of that. I didn't have the studio and this. I finally, a few years ago, just gave that up and said, you know what? I'm just going to show up as Michael. And if you like me, then let's talk and do some business. And if you don't, then let's just part companies because we're not going to be happy together. If I could have told myself way back then just to be myself, I think I would have built a lot deeper relationships. I would have been more authentic. And I think a lot of life would have gone more easily because I wouldn't be a poser.
Interesting. So kind of not feeling comfortable in the costume or uniform that you thought you had to wear, and
right.
If turning it around, saying, hey, I'm just going to be me, and that's what people are going to buy. And if they don't like me, then that's okay.
It's okay. Because there's plenty of people who do like me, believe it or not.
Well, you seem like a likable guy.
Thank you. I try to be. Yeah. It's, life's too short not to have a lot of fun. And, it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. So Michael, if there are people out there listening and they think to themselves, hey, I think I want to contact this guy. Maybe I want to write a book, or dictate a book, or have my story be told. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. Paperbackexpert.com is our website. And from there, you can find all things Michael. You can schedule a call. You can see what we do. You can learn from videos, free trainings. It's all at paperbackexpert.com.
All right. So my guest today has been Michael DeLon from Paperback Expert. Michael, it was a great conversation. Thanks for chatting.
Thanks, Mike. Oh, you're welcome. It's been a lot of fun. You ask great questions.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.